Good day, everyone, and welcome to Different Stages Radio. I'm your host, JJ, broadcasting from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And we got a good one for you today. You know, my next guest from delivering such classics is Barely Holding On, Only Human, Some Girls Do, Baby Go Round. She's also a 16-time Juno nominee, and last year she received a star on the Canadian Walk of Fame. And she's ready to launch a brand new album coming out on April 26th called Tattoo Me, a collection of covers. Please welcome my guest, the undeniable metal queen, Lee Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good to
I'm
see
great.
you. Good
Good
to
to
see
see
you.
you
Good to
too,
see you.
JJ. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, April 26th, just around the corner. Big day, big album, collection of covers, a lot of deep tracks, a lot of not of obvious tracks. What was the inspiration behind Tattoo Me?
The inspiration was just simply that I'm working with a wonderful creative group of musicians in my band. I've spent quite a few years trying to find the perfect players in this renaissance stage of my career. I've been working with Dave Reimer and John Cody for about over 20 years. And Sean Kelly came into the fold about 11 years ago, wonderfully talented guitar player. And we just have this wonderful creative energy and chemistry together. And we are always looking for new projects to tackle. And when we were on the Monsters of Rock cruise last year, we were having dinner and we're like, okay, what's going to be our next fun thing? Because we were touring Elevate through the spring and summer of last year. And somebody at the dinner table floated the idea of doing a covers record. And we were like, wow, that's a cool idea. Like a full covers, like a covers record, like where you pick the songs because these artists were influential to you and meaningful to you. And it just seemed like a really fun project. And truth be known, I didn't really expect sort of the response I'm getting, which is everybody kind of wants to talk to me about it. And there seems to be a lot of interest. And surprisingly, the second single, Even It Up, is kind of taken off on YouTube. I just was looking the other day going, okay, the first single's kind of stuck around this many thousand views, but every day this other single keeps getting more and more views. So go figure. Who knows? Right?
And I can only imagine that Hart, Ann, and Nancy were huge for you with, you know, inspiring you, getting you excited about being a band leader. Like you must have been listening to their records all the time as a kid.
Well, I always say that Robert Plant and Ann Wilson were a couple of the greatest vocal teachers a girl could have. I spent so much time um, listening to that material when I was young and with my little suitcase record player, we all have one of those, right, in the
Mhm.
basement. And I would put it on and I'd listen over and over and over again and sing along, trying to get my vocal chops. And yeah, I loved everything about Heart. I love the fact that they were women that were played their own instruments, wrote their own songs. They were equals in the band. They were band members with the guys in the band. Um, they didn't trade on their sexuality for attention, and they were everything that I wanted to be. They were bona fide musicians, and that, as for me as a young girl, was the whole reason I wanted to get involved in the music industry. Now I had to stumble through some really awkward marketing in the 80s, just because the 80s was this weird time of sexuality and women were really being objectified, especially in all those videos, right? Like it was very, very common to see, the testosterone filled, guys with eyeliner and big hair. And, let's have some girls in our videos and they can be wearing bikinis and they can be working at the car wash and they can wash our car and they can all get wet. And it was just like, oh, please,
All the
you know,
stereotypes.
totally stereotypical, right? And so as a girl rocker, you're fighting against that constantly. Like, no, that's like, so yeah, and of course, dial forward to 1989 when we did the Body Rock album. And What You Do to My Body was sort of a play it was about women being empowered and taking control of their sexuality. And we did a play on that visually by hiring a bunch of really good looking guys and putting them in the video and having them sprayed down with water. But we did it not in a offensive objectification way. We did it in a tongue-in-cheek, like, let's have a big burly cute biker holding a baby, let's have him petting a puppy, so that it was sort of like it was supposed to be done with definitely a huge sense of humor. So
there you go.
yeah.
Well, back to though Tattoo Me, and I need to ask, because there's such great variety of songs, older tracks, some later tracks, but no Canadian stuff on there. That was a bit surprising to me, that there was I thought there might have been that one subtle thing. So I guess in a way, maybe Heart is almost borderline Canadian, because they did spend a number of their first few years as a band in Vancouver. So in a roundabout way, they're honorably Canadian. Can we say that? But no full on Canadian.
We would like to take a little bit of ownership over them because of the years that they spent in Vancouver, and they're recording at Mushroom Studios. And
yeah.
But yeah, they were definitely from Seattle. But yeah, I just
the way it happened.
It's just the way that the cards landed for this record. It wasn't that I don't like any Canadian artists, but unfortunately, like, which female hard rock artists there was no one, right? And so there really wasn't anyone for me to role model after who was Canadian. I mean, my mother listened to Anne Murray, and there was an artist in the 70s, what was her name? Patsy Gallant. Do you remember her? Or so there were a lot of female folk and pop artists. Oh, there was a group from where I was from too. Sorry, I'm just having like brainwaves here. In Brampton, where I grew up, there was an all-girls singing group called the Peaches. Do you remember them?
I don't remember.
No, I remember because they were local, and but they were kind of just like everything I really didn't want to be. I mean, don't get me wrong, Joni Mitchell, like, as a more mature artist, I look back and go, she was incredible, amazing songwriter. Like, I have A Case of You is like my favorite Joni Mitchell song of all time. But as a young girl, there were no real role models for me. There was Joan Jett, the Runaways. Joan Jett wasn't even a Joan Jett yet. She was still in the Runaways. There was Fleetwood Mac. There was Heart. And then later I got into Joplin. But there were not a lot of women doing this.
And probably maybe just a pinch before you started, maybe Pat Benatar a little bit, as far as, can we slide her in there too, maybe?
Yeah, she kind of came right around the time I joined a rock band when I was 15 or 16. She's older than, because she's at least a decade older than I am. Pat Benatar. I would say, somewhat influential as well. Although that first album, she didn't really write a lot of her own songs. There was a lot of covers. So for me, the whole thing with Heart was they were writers, and I was a writer. And same with Stevie Nicks and Christy McVie, right? They were equal in those bands. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Pat Benatar went on to form a partnership, obviously, with Neil Giraldo, and they wrote many successful records after her first record. But that first album, I think I even was kind of like, so is she's got a great voice, but is she just a voice that sings songs? And because there was a lot of that that transpired later in the 80s, where the record companies were like, here's a female, and she's good looking, and she can sing. Let's find her a bunch of material and create a package we can market, right?
Very manufactured.
Very manufactured. That's correct. Yeah.
Very good. So with the collection of songs, now, were these songs primarily chosen by yourself, or was it a band effort? Was the rest of your band involved in choosing tracks or suggesting tracks?
Oh, 100%. I kind of came in with the idea that, there's certain artists that are critical for me. Like, I wanted to do a Heart number. I wanted to do a Fleetwood Mac number. I wanted to do an Elton John song because I loved Elton John as a teenager. In fact, I was like, no, we're doing Someone Saved My Life Tonight. I've always wanted to do that cover, but I wanted to do The Pusher by Nina Simone. I love her version of that song. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's a piano version. And it's just so unique. It's very different from the Steppenwolf and the Hoyt Axton original version. That was really important to me. And then a lot of it was like up for negotiation, when we floated the idea of doing an Alice Cooper tune. I love Alice Cooper, but my husband came in with the idea of, why don't we do Is It My Body? And the idea of revisiting those early, that very, very early, really raw, really gritty street Alice Cooper sound was really quite appealing to me as well. So, but yeah, so there was, a lot of input from the guys in the band in terms of what the material was going to be. But ultimately, I'm the singer and it has to go through my filter. I have to be able to bring it to life vocally. So 100%, that it was sort of, I guess, me making sort of the final decision, right?
Right. And the first single, Tattoo, when I first heard it, because it is fairly obscure, I thought that could pretty much be a Lee Aaron song. I don't know how you feel about that or just the way you were able to interpret it. It definitely seems to have your stamp on it. I don't know. I think that helps sometimes for a fan or a listener to hear what is essentially a cover, but if they're hearing your version for the first time, to them, now that's the original. So I went back and searched it out, and I'm like, that doesn't seem to sound right now. It seems it should sound the way that you do it.
Well, then we've done our job well, then, haven't we? Yeah, when I first heard that tune many moons ago, my husband had played it for me, and I was like, "Ooh, I could definitely hear that being a Lee Aaron tune." It just really resonated with me. The lyric content, like, if you love me enough, you're going to tattoo me, not tattoo me, but tattoo me on you. That resonated, and yeah, I mean, it obviously clicked. I sent it to Sean Kelly, my guitarist, and he loved it. And he's got such a wonderful, unique style of playing. He was really able, like, my thing was just like, do your thing, pal. You're amazing. I already work with players that I love, that I know I can trust them to do wonderful stuff. So, when we had recorded the majority of the tune, I remember calling him back up and saying, I really feel like this needs like a signature guitar line coming in on that, second to last out chorus and the last out choruses to give it a further lift sonically. And he sent me back these little guitar lines he was playing, and that they were just perfect, because we have that level of trust with each other. I know that he's going to do something great, and we speak the same language when we're talking music, right? So yeah. And so, yeah, the whole idea with that track was to kind of make it sound like it could be a Lee Aaron song. So, and I think if that's what you're hearing, I guess we did
You
it.
succeeded. You succeeded.
Yeah.
Now, was there any songs that you thought about doing or attempted to do that just weren't maybe clicking, and you thought, well, maybe it's best to abandon that song for now and maybe try it another day?
So, yeah, I really wanted to do Little Red Corvette by Prince. I was a huge Prince fan in the 80s as well. I saw him live with Sheila E.
Good
On
for you.
drums. She was just incredible. Holy smokes, what a great player. So the original, like we'd worked it up. The original, like, Prince was a producer too, right? And so he had this, and obviously everything was done analog when he did it, but he had programmed some kind of loop, and it had like a bit of a weird kind of ambient slap back. So it was like like this kind of like really, really cool, unique drum loop. And we just like had a difficulty coming up with something that signature was ours, but that sort of had the same vibe. We tried just real drums, then tried a loop, then loop and real drums on top. And you know what? I wasn't happy with, it wasn't my vocal, it wasn't the guitar playing, it was just the feel. We couldn't get the unique kind of feel of that song. And my feeling was, if we can't tackle this and make it sound as good or better than the original, more unique than the original, and there's no point in attempting it. I didn't want to put anything on the record that I felt was a failure, that people might go, oh, well, that's not as good as the Prince version, right? And because you can go on YouTube and see tons of people doing covers that fall flat, right? That wasn't what I wanted to do. So
I think it takes a lot for a person or a band to know when to bow out and to let it go and go, well, it's just not for me. It's just not going to work. Or maybe you just put it on pause and perhaps maybe return to it another time, have a different idea of how to mix with the arrangement and make it something new. But for now, it's like, we'll just leave it be. It's just, we tried.
hard drive there. So yeah, we can always unearth it and try to work it up at another point in time. Sometimes coming back to things with a fresh set of ears is exactly what you need to do anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Okay, well, I'd like to bounce now to we lost somebody just a few weeks ago, Rocket Norton, and you were a big part of his F cancer benefit this past fall. Do you have any stories, anything you'd like to talk about and share about Rocket?
Oh, so many friends. He was such a wonderful drummer and such an amazing humanitarian as well. Everybody was so saddened when he left us. My husband and I had the unique and wonderful privilege of spending an entire evening with Rocket and his wife, Bea, less than a week before he passed away. We had gone into Vancouver. We knew that he was receiving hospice care at that point, but we'd gone into Vancouver and to see a play, and we asked him, do you have enough energy? Do you mind if we pop in to see you tonight? We thought we'd pop in for 45 minutes, an hour to have some tea, whatever. And he was just in rare form. He was feeling really up and he was in great spirits and he was super talkative. And we ended up abandoning the idea of the play and staying all night for about 3.5 hours, talking with him and his wife. And he was just reminiscing and telling us all kinds of cool road stories and how he'd met people. And we got to really tell him how much we appreciated not only him, but what he had done for BC Cancer Foundation. He was recently just awarded with a huge award from BC Cancer because he raised over $750,000 with those benefits. And it looks as though Bill Allman, who runs the Vancouver Walk of Fame, as well as my husband and I we're helping. Bill Allman is running it, is going to put this together, but my husband and I are going to take care of the music direction side, and we're going to remount it for 2024 and keep it going in his name. So it's going to be called Rocket Norton's Rock Cancer, and we are going to carry the torch forward. And he was in tears when we told him that. You get to a certain age and stage in your life where it's almost impossible to have not had this horrible illness touch your life in some way. I've walked through this journey. My mother passed away from cancer in 2017. I lost two best friends, one when our son was 6 months old. I lost one to a brain tumor. Another really great friend of mine had bone cancer. And 41 years old, she passed away. It gutted us, not to be on too much of a downer note. So it is something that's extremely personal to me and to many of our West Coast alumni friends in the music industry. And everyone that's walked on that stage the last 2 years has volunteered their time 100% for free. And hang your ego at the door. They've been really, really wonderful events.
So you will be hugely involved in carrying on the torch for Rocket Norton. Those who don't know Rocket Norton, who might be listening globally, was the drummer from PRISM, fought cancer for a long time, huge presence in the West Coast and all of Canada music scene, just quality dude. And then just a few months back as well, like we sadly lost Myles Goodwyn from April Wine. And you had a connection with Myles going back to 1988. You guested on one of his tracks on his solo album. Any stories that you could share about Myles that the listeners might enjoy hearing?
An incredible artist. April Wine had already had many, many huge hits. He was doing a solo record, and I hadn't even had my biggest hits in Canada yet. This was pre Body Rock, but he was a big admirer of my voice, and he called me up and asked me would I like to guest on his solo record, and I was just like, of course. I was so honored. And I just remember just every time I got an opportunity to work with a much more seasoned artist than myself, like a Myles, I was like a sponge. I was taking things away from watching him in the studio. And, it was just such a great honor to be able to not only guest on his record, but to have known him over the years. And again, what a great, like, April Wine. I mean, this music formed the fabric of Canadian music heritage, right? Like
Their anthems are just never.
it's and so it was right. We saw him again, of course, at Canada's Walk of Fame in September last year, and he made this comment that this is probably going to be the last time I see anyone. Now, some people are very public about their journey with cancer, and some people are very private, and Myles chose to be private. So at that time, none of us knew. None of us knew that he was fighting this illness. But he gave me a big hug, and he said, Lee, it's so great to see you again. And we got to, tell each other that we loved each other, loved working together. And and then, then we found out a couple months later that was he was basically telling us he knew it was his last goodbye. And so it's hard, it's hard losing these Canadian greats and people we love. And I think about, mortality more than I ever did, obviously. You get, I guess, to that stage where you realize every day I step on stage and I get to do this, pick up a guitar and rock out, and I get to look out there and I get to see like granddad and dad and 5-year-old on dad's shoulders at an all ages music festival. And you go, okay, my music has transcended 2 to 3 generations of people here over the course of 40 years. There is no greater gift than this, right? And I don't take it for granted, not for 1 second,
Just soak it in. Just keep soaking it in.
Totally. It's just such a privilege to walk up and be able to do this.
Delivered. Yeah. So you mentioned you touched on the Walk of Fame when you're speaking about Myles. When you connected there, can you tell us a little bit about how that whole process went down with you being a part of the Canada's Walk of Fame, the Rock Walk of Fame? That's a big deal. That's huge. So how'd that all come together?
So cool. Well, I'll tell you the little backstory.
Okay.
Gil Moore from Triumph is golf buddies, I guess, with Jeffrey Latimer, who runs the Canada's Walk of Fame. And they were talking over, I guess, a golf game, and Jeffrey said, like, I want to do something super special for the 25th anniversary of Canada's, because it's only existed since 98. There's only been about 200 people in all of Canada from different sectors of industry inducted. He said, I want to do something really special. And Gil, of course, being a rocker, he's like, why don't you do like the Rock of Fame, and we can honor some amazing, Canadian artists that are legacy artists that have formed the landscape of Canadian music that deserve to be honored. And Jeffrey just loved the idea. So Gil called me. And when he called me, he was explaining the sort of nature of the way the show was going to go down. And, some artists are too, with some of the artists that are, how do I explain it? I felt a little weird because I was probably one of the youngest artists inducted. Like a couple of them are 20 or plus more years older than myself. And some of them don't perform anymore. They can't, right? And so Gil was explaining to me that some of them won't perform their own material. There'll be a younger artist come up and do it. And so I thought he was asking me to maybe like step in and sing somebody's song. And then he asked me, would I accept the honor? And I was like, are you, what? Are you saying I'm inducted? And he's like, yes. And I was like, oh, wow. Wowza. Like I was
A little
really,
awkward,
huh?
a little bit awkward, sort of a little bit like just the
Like
timing was just
I
bizarre.
was
Like what?
like, wow, okay.
Uh,
Will I accept? Of course. And I was just, wow, what an honor. You know, I was one of only 3 female artists that were inducted. It was myself, Parachute Club, and Carol Pope.
mhm.
And you know, there, it was, how to explain it? It wasn't just about the music. It was about kind of what you represented, I think, to Canada. And, for Carol Pope and of course, Parachute Club, these are artists in the 80s, um, being very forward about their sexuality, not only and making great music with Rough Trade. I'm sorry, that's what I mean.
Mhm.
You know, um, that in a time frame when it was, you know, a little scary and a little dangerous to do so, and they were out there doing it. And respect, man, you just got to have so much respect for that. And my I think my thing was just that there weren't really any women doing a harder genre of rock music. There was really nobody in Canada. And as Jeannie Becker described it, she said, like, you kind of broke the glass ceiling for women in rock in Canada. And because I was all over the Power Hour, I had the lovely advantage of coming into the video age with my music right at the inception of MTV and Much Music. And so I got to be part of that visual music age, right? So that was, what can I say? It's such a great, incredible honor. I don't know. It
You're
was
still blown away
pretty
by it all.
surreal.
Yeah, yes, a
Yeah,
lot to
pretty
take away.
surreal.
So I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to go back to a time when I was 12, back in 1985. Going to be a little fanboy here for a moment.
Cool.
When I was buying my first real music with my paper route money, saving up my dollars. Um, Triumph, who I got on today, was my hugest band at the time. Loved Triumph, still love Triumph. Um, I heard Metal Queen, found it a bit too heavy for myself as a youngster.
You
But
had mentioned that before.
yes, and got
Yeah.
into and picked up Call of the Wild, was grooving on that. And then I also started to check out Kickaxe. I know Vices was already out, but I picked up a copy of Welcome to the Club back in the day. And then, oh, there's a cover of With a Little Help from My Friends on there. And then, oh, well, who's on this? Oh, and then there's the video that comes out, and there's Lee Aaron. So it just seemed everything at the time was just bridging this wonderful gap. And once again, being 12, it's everything, you're just absorbing everything.
So Get By with a Little Help from My Friends was your gateway? Was your gateway song to Lee Aaron, or?
Well, just as far as it connecting to Kickaxe that I was really getting into at the time, as well as just really appreciating and loving Canadian music and just being 12 and buying my first album. So it just seemed that everything was just connecting just lovely. And also, like I said, I'd picked up a copy of Call to the Wild. So it was just, or Call of the Wild, sorry. And it was all just meshing very nicely. So I wanted to ask you during those sessions of with Kickaxe doing With a Little Help from My Friends.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you can share of that time? And how did that come to be? Were you asked? Did you approach them? Was it a label thing? How did that go down?
Well, we were all kind of like road warriors together. A lot of the bands, we all played the same clubs, the same circuit. So we would often run into each other on the road in various places. And those guys were from Winnipeg, I believe, correct? Yeah.
I think
And
originally, possibly even Regina, then to Winnipeg, and now most of them are out in Vancouver now, or area.
just really, really nice guys.
Mhm.
So, you know, I was wondering, I don't have any specific stories other than I think I was telling you last time that I was always a little bit I always felt kind of awkward at industry kind of things where I'm like, I'm not very good at the schmoozy schmooze kind of like thing, right? And so I remember, despite my image being kind of out there, personally, I'm kind of a shy person. And I remember walking into that session and just feeling kind of shy, like, oh my gosh, the guys in Queensrÿche are here. Oh my gosh, this person's here. Oh my gosh, I feel really like I don't want to say anything stupid. And but by the end of it, we were all kind of like there was a lot of love in the room. I can tell you that. And of course, the whole theme of the song, was all about friendship, right? And
Mhm.
bringing the Canadian comrades, rock and roll comrades together to make this great tune. And, and I think that really broke through at radio for them, finally, that track. And so I just remember it was one of the, wonderful, warm experiences from back then. And one of those experiences that also still unites us and ties us all together today. Like, you can go 20 years without seeing a colleague, and then you see them and they're like, hey, Lee Aaron. I know the one time, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years ago, we were doing a show and Coney Hatch was on the bill, and I was literally in the ladies' room getting ready, putting on some makeup, and I hear a knock at the door, and someone goes, Lee Aaron. And I'm like, who is it? And he walks in, Andy Curran walks, and he goes, am I allowed to come into the ladies' room? He goes, I haven't seen you. And he goes and gives me a big hug. And we hadn't seen each other in years, but it's experiences like that that just bring us all together and unite us on our rock and roll mission across the country, right? And a lot of love between, especially now at this stage of the game
Yeah.
when we're all survivors. We're out there still doing it, right? So, yeah.
And I thought possibly with that collaboration that may have somehow led into Northern Lights, Tears Are Not Enough, which was Canada's answer to, we are USA for Africa's We Are the World, and what started it all, Band-Aids, do they know it's Christmas time? I thought maybe someone might have reached out to you at the time because that was perfect timing. 1985 seemed an ideal time. Where was the Lee Aaron camp ever approached about being a part of Northern Lights?
So my recollection around that is yes, but I had an album that took off in Europe.
Mm.
In 1985, I had recorded the Follow the Wild album. It was released on what used to be a small label called Roadrunner, and that album just out of the gate, a couple of weeks out of the gate, it sold 100,000 copies. So I was on tour in the spring, and then I was back on tour in the late summer, fall. I spent half of 1985 in Europe. And I believe I was not around to be able to do that session.
Gotcha.
So that would explain why. Yeah.
And so that could also explain then why my next question was about Hearing Aid Stars, Ronnie James Dio, that all-star cast, which was even kind of an extended version of that, which was, the hard rock metal version of We Are the World, Tears Are Not Enough, that sort of thing. So I imagine that was when that was recorded, 85, that would answer the question as to why perhaps you weren't a part of it, but just curious if you were even reached out for that opportunity.
Well, that particular collaboration was very USA band centric.
Mhm.
And I was a Canadian artist. So that one I wasn't actually invited to be on, truth be told. So
Okay. Because there were a few
yeah,
Euro musicians on there, but I guess I don't recall there being any Canadian ones. But I think just
yeah.
timing wise, it would have been nice to have some representation from north of the border. But it's done now, so there we go. So Tattoo Me, April 26th is coming out. You're going to be in Moncton on
Yeah.
April 26th, the day the album comes out, playing a show with Kim Mitchell and Streetheart. Any plans? You got a few shows that weekend? Anything special happening for Tattoo Me on April 26th?
We are playing that show in Moncton, and then we're heading to Halifax the next night for a solo show. And so we'll be headlining the next night in Halifax, and then back home, then back to Ontario the next month. Then in July, we are not headlining, we are playing the giant stage at the FEQ with Motley Crue. I don't know if I told you that. I'm opening up for Motley at that particular show. Then the end of July, we are back. My calendar, I don't remember, but I'm back and forth across Canada multiple times this year, mostly fairs, festivals, casino. I'm up in Thunder Bay. I'm back in the East Coast at headlining a festival in Miramichi, Tabor, Alberta. I'm doing I think it's called Cornstalk. Then I'm another one called Rock the Track. A bunch of festivals across Canada this summer. And then we are heading to Switzerland in November. Very excited about that. It's going to be a super cool show. We are putting together a special set for the 40th anniversary of the Metal Queen album. So we're going to be revisiting some material we don't normally play. And then we are collaborating with some other musicians for the grand finale of that show, which will be like a Montreux style jazzy rock jam. It's a really unique show, this U-Rock Festival. So that's going to be really cool too.
Good stuff. So you're like, I'm getting dizzy just mentioning all these places you're going to. It's like, that's crazy. So another question, just before we let you go, you have, you've been working on a book, Autobiography.
Yeah.
It's been a process. How's that coming along? Anything that we should know? Is it imminent? Is it not imminent?
It's not imminent. I know I keep promising, oh, it's coming next year, but I have to stop making records for a while and stop doing. I've had such an intense interview schedule lately, as well as just preparing for getting ready to go out and do some touring this summer. I need to have some untethered time here to be able to really focus. So I've been working on it in dribs and drabs. I don't want to put it out till it's ready. I don't want to rush something like I don't like to call it autobiography. It might not all be completely chronological. It's more like memoirs from certain pivotal junctures in my life that are important, and a lot of just cool stories from my life and the road and things I've done.
Well, thank you for all the information. This has been a good time, and I appreciate you so much for taking the time. This is Different Stages Radio, and I want to remind everybody, Tattoo Me comes out on April 26th through your own label, Big Sister Records. And Lee's put out a ton of records over the last number of years. So get on it if you haven't yet. There's a lot to check out. Like she said, she's touring everywhere. Looking forward to some more information about the special Metal Queen 40th anniversary sort of show happening in Switzerland. You got lots going on. We'll look forward to the book eventually. And that will be all for now. So thank you so much. My guest, Lee Aaron.